We see that all these mental conditionings, these mental activities, all come with a little bit of weight in them, weighing our minds, and we just let them go and break free completely from all of it. And this is Nibbana.
I'm leaving home for the coastline, someplace under the sun. I feel my heart for the first time.
Would you like to go on a little adventure tonight? On a little canoe expedition all together and explore the flood of Saṃsāra, the drainage divide of Saṃsāra, and explore beyond the flood. Thank you. Explore the other region of Dhamma, of liberation. I will take that as a yes. Good, willing people in the audience. Very good. So tonight we will explore a little bit what I call the ecosystem of our experience. That is called dependent origination. How our experience arises, how it functions, how it works. And tonight is the deep inner workings of the Buddha's teaching and the mind. In my own life and practice, I've noticed that simpler things go deeper in my own experience. And this is usually a very, very scholarly topic. And it can be really complicated. But it also can be simple, or somewhat simple. And hopefully we'll find ways that it's easy to understand and that we can actually integrate this deep, deep, deep wisdom of the Buddha on how everything works together. So first, yesterday we talked about this idea of a drainage divide between two kind of, in French we call them bassins hydrographiques, and in English that would translate into hydrographic basins, but I looked it up and it doesn't exist in English. So, so basically where the water falls and then runs down to the direction that goes. This was like a fairly zoomed in sequence where in the meditation practice we kind of cross over this ridge of the mind, and then cross over to an area where the water flows the other way. But tonight we will be zooming out and seeing these two ecosystems that are quite different. The ecosystem of Saṃsāra, how things work in this reality usually, and the ecosystem of liberation, and how to break free from the first ecosystem and move to the other ecosystem. And to do so, I've elaborated a little flowchart with pictures. Yay! And not a lot of words, just very bare minimum things. And I'll walk you through little stories about it and how we can understand this. And so all journeys have a starting point, and on the earth, a beautiful analogy is the ground, the earth. And the Buddha basically starts with saying that lacking discernment, and this is, if you have a pen, if you have a pen or a pencil, you could actually write down, because these are my own translations, and these are not the classical terms, so I can actually tell you the classical meaning, and you can write it down. So we'll start with the ecosystem of Saṃsāra, which is the one with the composting toilet at the top. You'll see, it'll all make sense, don't worry. So this is version 2.0, because 1.0 was in San Francisco at the Easter retreat, and there was a couple of mistakes. So you're lucky. You're not the guinea pigs anymore. So okay, and so at the very bottom, this is a picture of the field in Quebec, right in front of my house, yes. First, we start with the ground. And the root of all things, the Buddha said, is lacking discernment, lacking awareness. And this is basically the earth, the ground, for all of the rest to come up, basically. And I will be using a lot an analogy, the analogy of the garden, or the analogy of plants and seeds, and also computers, because it's kind of cool and it's modern. But both these analogies are quite helpful to understand this whole process. And so here you have the picture. I mean, it's kind of cut in half because of the printer here having a little trouble, but this is the field right in front of my house in Quebec, and it has all of this mature wheat on it, and you can see the St. Lawrence at the back. And basically, to have all of these seeds held up like this, because this is harvest time, it's kind of dry, and it's just a bunch of seeds hanging on stems. And to hold up this field, there's the ground. And the ground is basically not having enough awareness in our lives. And this is not just a one thing, flat, square understanding. This works on many levels, but we will move our way through different levels. And so here we are in this drainage divide of Saṃsāra, and we're ready to start our little expedition. And we have our canoe, and we have ourselves, our little being that is made up of many things. And so, first of all, we need to understand what is that? What is that being that is on that journey, that is on that adventure of the flood of Saṃsāra? And basically, here and now, we are a bundle of things we call Saṅkhāras. And Saṅkhāras are just a bunch of conditionings that we have picked up from many things in the past and held together now by certain forces, which we will talk about later. But we are basically a bag full of seeds, just ready to germinate. So we are walking around, and according to situations and conditions, certain seeds germinate and some don't. So this is the law of karma. It can be understood as seeds that are already within us, or it can also be understood as coding in a computer or in a software, basically. We are made up of all these so many thousands of little softwares that run and operate different programs and have their specific purposes. And we are programmed to behave in certain ways, and that we have accumulated over the years and over, again, you don't have to believe in past lives. but over past lives. So, and at this moment, please understand that we are talking about a package which we call identity, which we call me, which we call a self, that is made up of this body and this mind. And so it all kind of comes together at this point. It's not, one is dependent on the other, but also it is a bundle that comes together. There's not much to be done at this point, it's just the way that it is. It's just the way we're made. These mental activities, these conditionings in the mind, this background coding that is running through all of the programs that we run in our minds for every little situations, our preferences, opinions, ideas, and all of that. Basically, these create altogether a bundle that we call consciousness. We're starting right at the deep end, so please bear with me. And so basically, all this mental activity, if you were to look at a computer, on the surface it looks pretty mellow. It looks like there's a window open and that's about it, and it's static and there's not much going on. But in the background, there's a lot happening. There's a lot of coding running, there's a lot of tasks happening for the thing to actually work properly. Depending on your inclinations, whatever you have installed on your computer, then that's where the computer is operating. So we also have these inclinations. We have these programs in our minds. Artists don't use the same programs as video producers do, or writers. Writers use different programs altogether. So with our inclinations, we have these conditionings in our mind, and these are what make this whole system operate. And so all of these mental activities get together and form this cloud that we believe is, that we basically understand as consciousness. Now, this is a little bit of a steep beginning. Usually, this is one of the deepest understandings of dependent origination. When one goes all the way to the end of bare awareness, or the plane of nothingness, with a clear mind, and basically in neither perception and non-perception, we start to break away even consciousness itself. And we start to see that mind is actually fully fabricated. There's not a part of it that is actually eternal, that is some kind of permanent being or entity. It is possible to break it all apart and dissolve it like sand in the wind. And one of the analogies that I really like is the murmuration of the starlings. Is anybody familiar with this flock of birds, which actually gets together in this beautiful flock that is called a murmuration? And these little birds, they dance basically together, and they have these activities, these movements, that momentum all together, that synergy, and it appears to be a thing. It appears to be a cloud, but it's 1,000 little tiny birds all together. And consciousness is the same. If you take out all the little birds one by one, slowly in meditation, then at some point it's really hard to even see if there's any birds anymore. But there are still a few, and then we release them, let them go, and then it just merges into the open sky. There is no more consciousness, and we can tell when little birds start arising again, little tiny mental activities start arising again and start moving around, and then we release and let go again, and then there is the open sky again, nothing. There's absolutely nothing there. And so again, tonight, for your entertainment, for your learning process, because entertainment is not allowed on this retreat. And I have a little video again, which is like 2 minutes, but that shows you what the murmuration of the starlings is. And personally, I found it really helpful as an analogy to understand, and just to look at them. Maybe these are my previous conditionings of my own mind, but I find a lot of answers in nature and a lot of inspiring understanding in the Dhamma, in nature, and seeing those birds dancing around and moving and forming dancer consciousness, dancer clouds together, and then breaking apart, and then coming back together in a dancer shape and creating these interesting shapes. I find there is quite a lot of deep significance that we can correlate to our own mental processes also. So on this, I am inviting you to all again get homey and get closer. And I personally, I just like to contemplate these things, and it's so deep in meaning, for me anyways. How did that resonate with all of you? I really liked your comment on the neural network. Definitely is interesting. And did somebody, did that feel familiar? In perhaps you've been looking at your mind for a few days now? Yes, a little bit of dancing in there. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I really like this because this is so deeply important to the Buddha's wisdom, the Buddha's understanding that consciousness is not eternal and permanent, and it actually changes. It moves. It actually isn't this constant thing, but it is. You see how these birds, they split apart, but they don't actually. They usually don't kind of separate. They kind of go their way, and then they kind of come back, and then they seem sometimes to kind of break apart a little bit or become lighter even. You can't see them anymore, and then they kind of agglomerate again, and it becomes this darker, heavier mass. If Saṅkhāras are the seeds, then consciousness can be likened to a garden also, where all kinds of plants and vegetables grow. They're all individual, but they're all together also in that garden, which some people like broccoli more, so they plant more broccoli, so they have more broccoli seeds coming up, so they have more things like that. So all of our consciousnesses are a little bit different, full of different kinds of seeds, and so that's also interesting. And moving forward now remember, this is kind of all together, and this is kind of all neutral at this point. There's no real because there are Saṅkhāras, there is consciousness. Because there is consciousness, there is mind and body, basically. So these things, they really come together at this point. And the Buddha says also, mind and body and consciousness, they are interdependent. So one has to be with the other. And here, what really strikes me the most in terms of an analogy is really, as I said, I think it was yesterday, the analogy of the computer. Basically, you have all the software, all of the consciousness bits, the karma, the mental karma that is latent. But if you don't have the hardware, well, that's it. It stops there. So it needs the hardware to actually manifest, to come alive. And so mind and body, Nāma-Rūpa, is the same thing, basically. And so for those of you who have pens, you can write down in Saṅkhāras and mental activities, that is, yes, formations. Usually that would be mental, formations, yeah. And then consciousness is usually consciousness too. Mind and body is sometimes called mentality, materiality. It's a bit of a mouthful, but it also works. Or name and form, like Bhante, Katukurunda, Ananda. And so here we are, this little person that is standing on the shore, on this shore, with the canoe, ready to go for a little excursion in the flood. So we have a mind and a body, and there we are. And we know how this came about, basically, through conditionings. And having a mind and a body, there is this triangle that happens, which we saw in, which discourse was that? Now I'm testing your memory. Upādāna? Not really, but it was the other Madhupindika, yes, the ball of honey, where there is an object hits the eye, the form hits the eye, and then there is eye consciousness arises, and then from that consciousness, the meeting of these three is called contact. And when there is contact, there is an experience. When there is an experience, there is the arising. One can see the arising of thinking. And with the arising of thinking, one can discern the arising of propagation of concept fabricated by the mind. This was day 3, I think. When we have the senses, obviously these senses, they're not just neutral. They are basically receptors. And there is a contact that occurs at each of these sense bases, at each of these sense receptors. And when that happens, there is an experience that arises. But up until here, this is all very neutral. This is basically, this is why now you're probably wondering, what's this matrix doing there in the background of the triangle? Well, this is just raw data. And raw data doesn't have an opinion. It doesn't have a preference. It doesn't like or dislike. It doesn't want more. It doesn't want less. It's just what is. But what happens is that our inclinations get triggered. And from this raw data, which is tainted by our conditionings, basically. Like, you know, you go to a festival and they have these like purple glasses, or they have these yellow glasses, and they have these red glasses, and then when you put the glasses on, your world is purple. Well, it's the same thing for our own inclinations. So we see reality through the lens of our taints and inclinations. Now, while we are paddling along this flood of Saṃsāra, and we have all of these experiences impinging at all of the sense doors all the time, so there is something that happens, and since we necessarily understand the Dhamma because of lack of awareness or lack of discernment, which is the ground for all of this to be held together. Now we start creating a like, a preference, or a dislike, wanting or pushing away, wanting more pleasant experiences and pushing away unpleasant experiences. This like and dislikes starts slowly at this is very small, this is a very tiny moment where something arises at a sense door, and then, oh, I just want more. And it's quite benign, or it's quite inoffensive at the very root. And this wanting, this is what I translate as wanting, is usually called craving, Taṇha. So you can write that down in the classical terminology. And so here, this is me when I was 4 years old, with my big sister, Julie, and she's holding a caterpillar, and I want to hold the caterpillar too, and I can't because she has it and she's not giving it to me, and I doing the pouty face, I want the caterpillar. So that's craving. I like to keep it light because craving is just this huge word. Like, I just see like a big monster with like sharp teeth, like drooling. But craving is actually, this is craving. This is wanting. And wanting is not being okay with just seeing your big sister having this caterpillar, having a nice experience. I want that experience too, because that's how it works. Like, she's my big sister, I want to be like her. And now we're talking about already a little bit further on the chain here. I want to be like her. I want to be something. Because what I have is, I'm not content with what I have. I just want that other thing that looks so cool and shiny. With the things that we like and the things that we don't like, what happens is that with the things that we like, we just want more of it. And so we press the repeat button. And because that's how we find happiness, we're like, wow, this looks amazing. I want to be like that. I want to do that too. I'm just going to hold a caterpillar. And then I'm just going to look around and forage the whole place for caterpillars and butterflies. And, well, now it's becoming a little bit more. It's more than just once. It's more than one time. It's actually being repeated. And I used to be a market gardener, and so this is actually my greenhouse there. I was working in an organic greenhouse, and this is my propagation room. Because when you garden, basically you have these trays with maybe like 50 to 100 little holes in them, and then you put dirt, and then you put little seeds, and basically it just makes it really compact, and you can have a lot of seeds growing in a small area, which is kind of protected, especially for seeds, and gets water a little bit more. And what you want to have in your garden, you're going to propagate. So that's what that means. Basically, what we like in this world, we're going to take the trays and plant a lot of them. And if we like going to the movie theater, well, then we're going to go to the movie theater a lot. And so that's propagating. So propagating of concepts fabricated by the mind. And slowly, this is where papancha lies. This is where repeating lies, and this is where attachment lies also. Because when we repeat this over and over again, we start to grip more and more and more. And this is called Upādāna. Basically, usually called clinging. What I like to call it attachments. These are all of our attachments starting to grow. Some attachments are small. We have only a handful of little plants that we invested in. And some of our attachments are big. We have trays and trays and trays of all of these little plants growing. So what we want to see in our garden, then that's what we sow, and that's what we propagate. And now what happens when this matures and this grows up, then it starts to become a habitual tendency. Now we get really used to sowing these seeds all the time and planting those plants all the time, and it just becomes kind of unconscious. And this is where the wheel starts, you're starting to see where the wheel starts turning, where this becomes lacking awareness. Because it becomes unconscious. It becomes a habit pattern. And a habit pattern in itself is pretty much unconscious. We just do it out of habit. It's not even conscious anymore, it's just a reaction. Because this is how we're used to reacting. And so there is a junction here in dependent origination where it forks into two routes. One is we stay in the present life, in the present moment, and in the meditation practice here and now, and we can understand dependent origination like that. Or we go into past lives and future lives. So if we want to stay in this life, then we say these become habitual tendency, Bhāva, which usually is called either being or becoming, the classical understanding. This can be somewhat difficult to understand. Yet habitual tendencies is very tangible, and we can see it here and now. And whatever you're doing in your life, when you sit down at first on the retreat, that's probably what you're going to think about for a couple of days at least. Whatever happened and whatever you're used to doing. So the momentum kind of takes a little bit of time to calm down. And also in the other understanding, which is a bit more broad, is that basically there is an identity that starts to form here. There is a self view, a personality. Bhava is also means like existing, coming into existence. There is a beingness happening. And this is really interesting. I don't know how you find that, but to realize that who we think we are is actually just a bundle of attachments to these things. So I am an adventure guide. I am because I like nature, and I like spending time with the elements and with people in the outdoors, and I take that path and I repeat that. I do everything I can to go out, and at some point I start believing that I'm an adventure guide. At some point it happens, whether it's while I'm studying for it or after when I get the diploma. Or some people think, well, I'm a doctor, I'm a mechanic, I'm a neuroscientist, the real kind. Venerable, we spent too many retreats together and just spoiled it. No, I'm just kidding. Yes. And then also, I'm a monk. Which we don't escape from that circle either. There is quite a lot of bhava going on also in the monastic life that is possible, and we're not exempt from it. Yet, if we're really dedicated to this path, we understand that we've basically left this way of being and cultivating the release from that. So this is my sister. And she believes she's a mechanic, and she's fixing our camper van. on our way to crossing Canada, on our way to British Columbia. I wasn't born, actually. She probably saw my dad doing the same thing and fixing the car or something, and she thought, I want to be a mechanic. I'm a mechanic, so I'm just going to fix the car. I just think it's cute. And I think, you know, for me, dependent origination, I've seen it and understood it the most in children, because you can see it so clearly. It's like so much love for their parents and like their family, and they just want to be like their parents. And even though they're born definitely with a personality, my two nephews, you know, when they were born, they were like very distinct personalities, like very, very different. And yet they like their parents so much. Their parents are gonna say something that they think is like sounds pretty good, or I don't know, like saying some jokes or whatever, and they're just gonna start saying the same jokes and saying the same kind of expressions and things like that. And you can really see, this is how it begins. Because this was not you, this was your dad, or this was your mom. And actually, when we start seeing it like that, it's really interesting, because we can see personality accumulating from very, 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 very young. And actually, it's a mechanism, it's a growing mechanism too. It's not all bad, because we need to build that, you know, like, I think a child or any individual needs a certain amount of, you know, experience in life to kind of to be able to orient themselves in life before they can actually like try to understand dependent origination and let go of the whole process. Unless there are these 7-year-old arahants in the time of the Buddha, which seem to come up sometimes in the stories. But I think these are kind of rare occasions. Yes, the lucky ones, the liberated upon landing. Those lucky ones. And this is where we're actually coding our brains and our minds. So here you see these mental activities that are running in the background. At the beginning we talked about Saṅkhāras. Well, here at Upādāna, attachments, and also habitual tendencies or identity, this is where we are actually writing the software. We are writing the code, line by line, reaction after reaction, expression after expression, because we want to be something else, something that is more, that is better. And now writing the program of our minds, this becomes very habitual, like a habit pattern, and we have these, basically we start taking actions upon these habits. And when we take these actions, it's, like I said earlier, it's quite unconscious, because we're basically reacting out of habit, reacting out of our conditionings. Somebody says something not nice to you, and you reply immediately something not nice to them. That is one of the ways we can see that. I go into a grocery store, and my favorite ice cream is pistachio, and I just see the freezer, and I just, you know, there's a lot of things going through my head. I'm working, I'm busy, I just want ice cream. I open the freezer, just grab it, put it in the cart, and just move on. And then I realize at the till that it's like, oh right, I got some ice cream. Ever happened to you? That happened to me. Yes. Yes. It's bodily, verbal, and mental. Yeah. Birth of action, mental birth of action would be, well, any thought that arises upon your past conditionings. I would say that even any physical action would come with verbal action first, and then mental action also first, before that even. So it's like that gradient of intensity, and yeah, yes. Yes. Yes, exactly. So your past conditionings and habitual patterns bring you to that place where you think, oh, I want to go to India because I'm a monk and India is awesome. And first you have the thought, and then you have the verbal formations, well, the verbal action, which you're going to start thinking about it. Verbal action, the Buddha said, these are basically vitaka vichara, thinking and reflection. Because these voices in our head, that's what it is. It's just thinking. And then based upon that thinking, if the intensity is very strong, then there will be a taking of action. So you'll go to, I don't know, like whatever, trip.com and like book your flight ticket. And that's it. I mean, you know, this is not only negative. We'll see a little bit more of this whole process, but we have to start somewhere, and then we can discuss a little bit more. And I put this flower there because this is where our plants just kind of bloom, basically, and it blooms into this flower and into this. If we go into the multi-lifetime dependent origination, then this is the bloom of a new birth. As I explained, we are coding the mind, we are coding the Saṅkhāras in through our habitual tendencies and attachments, and these become stored. We store them. And I like to see it, it's so relevant and so beautiful. You have this new beautiful flower that emerges, and it's beautiful. And usually the flower comes first, and then the seeds come when the flower dies. So there's this cycle where this new birth comes into bloom, and then it starts fading away, and then the seeds come out, and then guess what? Then the plant dies, but then there's 1,000 seeds in the ground, and then these grow again. So this is that cycle, and that's one thing I learned actually in that greenhouse, that there's so many seeds in the soil, it's unbelievable. Like even in like greenhouse production, we actually they torch. They would water first in like an efficiency kind of procedure, because weeding is a big issue. It competes with your plants, and also. I mean, when you're a producer, the less labor you pay, the better it is. Is that they will drench the beds first and let all of the seeds grow, and then torch it with a flamethrower, and then basically, then just punch in the holes for whatever you need, and disturb the soil as least as you can, because as soon as you flip the soil over, then there's more seeds at the surface that can grow again. But so the beds of our existence are full of seeds, because we've done this so many times. We've come up and down, come up and down. And then, well, when we've done this, Saṃsāra, the Buddha said that it is without a discoverable beginning. This is the drainage divide of Saṃsāra. This is how it all works. And when the water of craving pours into that basin, it all flows into there. and feeds the whole process, which is held by the earth of lacking discernment, as the support for all of this to come up. Now you might think that this is kind of sad, but there is a solution, and it's called page 2. And here, just to wrap up page 1, this is at the very top. Here is a trouble, and trouble is actually interesting because as we're transitioning from page 1 to page 2, from one drainage divide to the other, now it all leads to kind of a lot of trouble, because the more we get attached to things, the more we have strong preferences, the more our minds can be shaken, these things can be taken away from us at any time. And these are grounds for agitation and trouble and anxiety and stress and all these things. But the more we get in touch with that, and I think a lot of people understand on the spiritual path, on the spiritual journey, that it is by encountering a lot of suffering, a lot of problems, a lot of trouble in our lives, that we actually start to have faith and want to discover the path, discover what's going on. And a lot of people turn to spirituality and Eastern religions and understandings. And what happens here is that actually this gives rise to fuel for the practice. And this is my composting toilet, which I used to have 25 acres of forest in eastern Canada, and I built a tiny house on that piece of property, and basically I was by myself, and I was gardening at that point too, and every good gardener knows that the more compost you have in your life, the better your garden is going to be. And so the more these experiences, we accumulate them, we come into hardship in our lives, well, actually, there's always a way to turn it into very fertile compost to help our garden to grow. And so this is the composting toilet idea here. And so when you start understanding things like that, then you welcome all the challenges in your life. They are there to teach you. They are there to help you grow. And in one way, actually, the more intense the problems, you will see later when you overcome them, you have such a fertile pile of compost to use on your garden. You can actually grow a really awesome garden and feed a lot of people. So when you change your perspective in that way, you'll start to realize that this is actually all good. And whatever happens to you, whether it's good or whether it's challenging, you'll be able to always turn it to your advantage. And now what happens here is also determination arises. So here, the word Saddha, confidence. This is the desire to change, to come out of this, to start practicing. Maybe you've heard of meditation. Your friend told you, oh, you should try a 10-day retreat somewhere, and you go to some kind of 10-day retreat, and then like, oh wow. So this is what happens. Well, this was what happened to me anyways. My friend was going to a Vipassana retreat, 10-day retreat, and I was going through a hard time, and I was like, sounds like everything I've ever wanted to do. And I went, and it changed my life. Look. So I put the little monk here, the little Samanera, who's like probably just as old as I am when I'm holding my sister. And I just like that he's like, he's young and fresh and reborn, and he's like, I'm not doing that again. I just love how he's just that Samanera is coming in, no more of this. And when we start practicing, what happens? when realizing that these 5 hindrances have been abandoned within. Now you have to fill in the gap. Pāmojja arises, gladness arises, relief arises. I translate Pāmojja as either relief or gladness, depending on, there's 2 kind of different ways to see that. He uses it when he explains the Buddha-anusati, the Dhamma-anusati, recollections of the Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha, and how it brings gladness and then joy. For that, I call it gladness. When we talk about abandoning the 5 hindrances because of the 5 similes that the Buddha gives, like being freed from debt, freed from slavery, coming upon an oasis in the desert, then it's like that relief more. So this is what happens when I was sitting day 6 at my first 10-day Vipassana retreat, and I was sitting with a somewhat clear mind, actually a lot clearer than anything I'd ever experienced before. For the first time in my life, I was pretty amazed. And so I was, wow, this is so amazing. This is even possible? Like, I don't have to think all the time? That's amazing. And so there's this gladness, this relief that arises. And so from that gladness, that relief, then there's joy. Joy arises. And this is the beginning of, this is the 2 wings of awakening. This is where we see this in the path. The transcendental dependent origination. Joy that feeds into calm, and calm that feeds into joy. Beating our wings, this is what happens. We experience more and more happiness. And this is a place in Nelson, BC, in Canada, where I used to go on Pindapat, on alms round. And this was my meditation seat, where the town is actually on the bottom right there. And I would put my bowl on the side, and having come back returning from his alms round, sitting cross-legged on the side of a hill, on the hillside, in a cave or at the root of a tree, one meditates, whatever the rest would be. So, and then by doing that, living very lightly, and living by the Dhamma, practicing, living upheld by the virtues, we beat our wings and we experience happiness more and more. And when the mind becomes happy, Sukhino chittang samadhyati. Very good, Venerable. You've been listening. Very good. So the mind becomes collected. And now here, I kind of put this whole sequence on top, all together on the same level, because it all kind of happens together. When there is this, that also happens. So when the mind is collected, and I like that beautiful image of this child sitting on an elephant without a worry in his mind. He's probably somewhere in India in like this beautiful, massive, pink-orange sunset. Mind doesn't have a worry, it's protected by virtue, and it's practicing the Dhamma. It's collected and very happy, and it moves along. And when that happens, we start to see things for what they really are, not tainted by all of the things that we've created in the past in our minds. And then I like the analogy, this is an analogy that I use for the 4 resting places of awareness, the 4 satipatthanas. Seeing the body as body, seeing sensations as sensations, seeing mind as mind, and seeing Dhamma principles as principles. And this is like the pure, pristine desert, sand dunes, where you see the sand dunes, the body, the grains of sands for what they are, the grains of sands that make up the sand dunes. And you see the open sky as the mind, just for what it is. The sand dunes as the sand dunes, the sky as the sky, and any kind of weather patterns as weather patterns that come in. And so we're not adding on to this experience. It's just very clear and pristine, and we're not trying to make it in any other way. When that happens, when we see things for what they actually are, the way that they are, there is no clinging. There is no more holding on to. And so there is, at that time, there is a letting go. There is a turning away. There is naturally a disengagement that occurs. I will fill you in onto the classical terms here when we finish this line. And when we see things for what they are, the mind is collected. It's not agitated, not thinking about all these things proliferating. It's seeing things just as they are. As I said, the 4 satipatthanas, the 4 resting places of awareness, they are dependent origination, cleaned up from craving and ignorance. So basically that's what happens here. So you can actually tie it all in together. And when that happens, there's disengagement, nibbida. Nibbida can also be understood as disenchantment, which works. But for me, I like to see it more as, there's just a dropping away. There's a disengagement with things. Because we just see things as they are. And when there's a disengagement, you see that we're not trying to hold the sand dunes anymore. We're not trying to make it ours. And we just drop it away. And we give it back to the sand dunes. And then there is no more agitation. The mind is freed from craving. There is no craving at this point. I like viraga, which is nowadays called dispassion, which I think is kind of a dangerous word. It's not completely false, but it's to be understood properly. And dispassion doesn't mean that you just become a zombie. It actually means that, personally, anyways, those of you who've heard me talk on this before, viraga, this is a very old translation which comes from really old English, which was influenced by other spiritual and religious backgrounds of England at the time of the composition of the Pali Dictionary. And we've been using that word ever since because raga was understood as passion, like craving kind of thing. Raga is actually a synonym of Taṇha. And when we understand it in this way, we can understand, this is where there's no more Taṇha, Taṇha, raga. There is no more craving, there is no more agitation. So we let go. And this is the reconditioning process of the mind, the wholesome reconditioning process. See how it all comes and ties in together. So freedom from agitation. Samadhi is usually understood as concentration, which is a term I simply do not use. Because the samadhi that we practice is based on wisdom and cultivating wholesome mental states and abandoning unwholesome ones. It has nothing to do with forcing the mind and contracting the mind. It could be used, it could be understood that the mind becomes kind of co-centered. It becomes centered in a way, but in a general outlook, the word concentration kind of implies a forceful action. And in everything that I say, if anything I teach here is to move away, step out, release and relax, and not actually concentrate. It's a very defocused yet completely still and open awareness. Yatha bhuta jnana dasanam is seeing, knowing and seeing things as they really are. That's the actual meaning of this sentence. This can mean either discernment or steadiness of mind. And now when this package arises and all comes up, the mind is, by definition, these four things are by definition liberation. When these four things occur, there is release. They come all together in one big package. And so they all kind of support each other. And this is how the stilling of the mind happens, and the mind becomes like the mind of a Buddha, an Arahant. And these flows come out. They run dry. And I like the simile of the basin, the drainage divides, basically, that we've used yesterday. I was explaining this space in between the two basins of meditation where a person can get to. And this state where we've seen enough of Saṃsāra and we've heard the Dhamma, and now we are going upstream and we're practicing the path. And we're paddling upstream and paddling upstream. And then at some point we go through these levels that I explained yesterday. And at some point we enter the stream. And in one way or another, we understand the Dhamma deep enough that the mind cannot go back. It cannot reverse operate. And it goes only into the basin of Dhamma, of liberation. Page number 2. And we might get a little bit heedless sometimes, we get angry a little bit, but there is only a certain limit that can go to. It cannot go as much as it used to be. So it only hits a limit. And I like to see that as we're basically paddling, bringing in the joy and letting go of unwholesome states, bringing in the joy, letting go of unwholesome states, paddling, moving forward with steadiness of mind. The canoe is like this mental unity going through the river. And at some point in this expedition that I did in northern Quebec, this river kept becoming bigger and bigger and bigger, and what used to be a few meters wide became an estuary. It became so big, it became kilometers wide. And this is the same thing when we start to see things for what they really are. And when we were at that level, we were basically paddling north to the Arctic Sea, the Ungava Bay, and the landscape there became very, very barren, very pristine, untouched, just as it is. No humans been there, or very, very little disturbance. Beautiful, pristine waterfalls running off of granite, and these beautiful little trees growing at the bottom. It was mostly tundra at the top. And such beautiful landscapes, and it was also pristine, and it was all just moving by, and it was getting bigger and opening up, and at the end it was just this big opening, and we barely had to paddle at that point. There was so much current, we just disengaged, and there's no more paddling, and it's just slowly merging into the ocean. And then there's that vast expanse of beautiful stillness, Nibbana. And I wish that for all of you. then this is a way that we can understand it, where this all ends up in the ocean of liberation, of stillness of mind. There is no more effluence. It's all done, and it's the beginning point of everything. But monks, I say, in this stillness, the experience of that very stilling comes from a cause. It is not independent. What is the cause for the experience of this stillness? Release. Yes, release should be said. But this release comes from a cause. It is not independent. What is the cause for release? Freedom from agitation should be answered. Yes, very good. But this freedom from agitation comes from a cause. It is not independent. What is the cause for freedom from agitation? Disengagement? Yes, good answer. Now it's tricky because I didn't put little arrows between all of the slides, so you kind of have to use your gray matter. But this disengagement comes from a cause. It is not independent. What is the cause from disengagement? What? Discernment, yes. Very good. Now it's hard because you have a choice. So I tell you these choices. Discernment should be answered, but this discernment comes from a cause. It is not independent. What is the cause for discernment? Decide. Mental collectedness, very good. But this mental collectedness comes from a cause. It is not independent. What is the cause for mental collectedness? All together. Very good. Isn't that interesting? Happiness. Well, that's so great. Are you guys sure? This is how samadhi happens? That's so amazing. Through happiness. Okay. But this happiness comes from a cause. It is not independent. What is the cause for happiness? Calm should be answered. But this calm comes from a cause. It is not independent. What is the cause for calm? Joy. Are you sure? Wow. That's pretty amazing. The Buddha's teaching is pretty good. Like we have happiness and then we have joy. Amazing. This joy comes from a cause. It is not independent. What is the cause for joy? Relief should be answered. Isn't it funny that we have relief, joy, calm, and happiness? And these seem to be kind of thematic. Like one of them is kind of like this kind of letting go, this flavor of relaxing, releasing, relief, calm, and then the other side seems to be really clearly showing joy and happiness and that importance as well, and how the two meet together. But this relief comes from a cause. It is not independent. What is the cause for relief? Confidence should be answered. I'm really dragging you guys along tonight. It won't be too long more. Don't worry. But this confidence comes from a cause. It is not independent. What is the cause for confidence? Trouble. Yes. The composting toilet. Remember, the more you have of it, the better it is. Trouble should be answered, but this trouble comes from a cause. It is not independent. What is the cause for trouble? Blind reactions or reacting blindly, birth of action, blind actions. should be answered. But these blind reactions come from a cause. They are not independent. What is the cause of blind actions? Habitual tendencies, or what did I write here? Habitual tendencies or identity, yes, should be answered. But these habitual tendencies come from a cause. They are not independent. What is the cause for habitual tendencies? Attachments, yes. All the things that we hold on to. Me, this is me. But these attachments come from a cause. They are not independent. What is the cause for attachments? Wanting should be answered. But this wanting comes from a cause too. It is not independent. What is the cause for wanting? Experience, yes, all felt experiences. This is the ground where all of our opinions, ideas, concepts, preferences, wantings arise. But all of these felt experiences come from a cause. They are not independent. What do we need for these felt experiences to come up? Contact should be answered. But this sensory contact also comes from a cause. It is not independent. What is the cause for sensory contact? What do we need for that to happen? The 6 senses, very good. But these 6 senses come from a cause. They are not independent. What is the cause of the 6 senses? So we need mind and the body to experience these 6 things that we call our senses. Mind and body should be answered, but this mind and body come from a cause. It is not independent. What is the cause of mind and body? What do we first need? What transmigrates from one body to another? Is the consciousness. Very good. We've been talking about this. But this consciousness comes from a cause. It is not independent. And what is the cause of consciousness? Mental activities, yes, all of these little starlings flying and swirling around in our minds. But these mental activities come from a cause. They are not independent. What is the cause of mental activities? Lacking discernment, lacking awareness. This is the ship that holds everything together. This is where we tie the loop with yesterday's talk on the way out, the path, the free and open path to be traveled with joy that we saw on day 3. The path of meditation, where we can actually see this mass of consciousness break apart and fall away and become liberated from it, where we can't even tell there's little birds arising anymore. It just becomes this beautiful expanse of nothingness, of liberation, this voidness, that bliss that comes from a liberated mind. And we see that all these mental conditionings, these mental activities, all come with a little bit of weight in them, weighing our minds. And we just let them go and break free completely from all of it. And this is Nibbana. Just as when it pours down heavily on the mountain tops, that water rushes down, filling the main valleys and gorges. The main valleys and gorges being full, they fill the streams. The streams being full, they fill the creeks. The creeks being full, they fill the rivers. The rivers being full, they fill the estuaries. The estuaries being full, they fill the great ocean. And so this is what we are practicing here on this retreat. I hope this helped you a little bit understand the deeper aspects of the Dhamma, our practice here and now, the direct experience of Nibbana, which is so important to understand. May suffering ones be suffering free, and the fear-struck fearless be. May the grieving shed all grief, and may all beings find relief. May all beings share these merits that we have thus acquired for the acquisition of all kinds of happiness. May beings inhabiting space and earth, devas and nagas of mighty powers, share these merits of ours. May they long protect the Buddha's dispensation. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
I'm leaving home for the coastline, someplace under the sun. I feel my heart for the first time, 'cause now I'm moving on, yeah.